Child in life. Today I'm here with Margaret, who is a army child, army brat. So Margaret, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Very good. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So start by telling us what it was like growing up as an army brat for you.
Well, my first memory is like moving a lot and pluses and minuses. As you know, kids
Right.
aren't very appreciative of being separated from their friends, especially when you feel comfortable and have friends, and then all of a sudden you're being uprooted.
Right.
Uh, the other things that can be negative about it are, when your father or the parent is on an unaccompanied tour and then you don't see him for a while. I don't
Yeah.
really remember this, but my mother told me about it. My father was sent for a 2-month TDY in Alaska. And I guess because it was so cold, he didn't shave. And I was only old at the time. So she took us to the airport to welcome him back. And he was so excited to see his baby. And he had his little arms, he had his arms out. And I started screaming because I didn't know who this strange person was with the hairy face. It really crushed the spirit. Now, on
Yeah.
the plus side, you learn to navigate almost any circumstance. We went to different countries. You have to make friends. You have to learn what the rules are. You have to learn how to fit in and not offend people. And I think that made me very comfortable as a grown up in my life, professionally and otherwise, because you use those skills wherever you go.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think there are so many there are so many negatives to the military life, and it's a struggle for so many, like you said, making friends, moving around, those unaccompanied tours, everything. But then it's so rewarding looking back at it as an adult and everything that you've learned in those years of growing up, of moving and making new friends and putting yourself out there that really impacts you as an adult.
Exactly. I think overall it was a plus. I was a bit of a sensitive kid, so I know emotionally I had some issues with it, but a little bit of therapy gets you through those sort of things.
Yeah, I think, it's definitely something that we have to adapt to everything, and we have to just constantly keep rolling with the punches and take whatever cards are dealt to us. And we don't have the option to say no. Like, if we don't want to move somewhere, we can't say no. You just have
Right.
to go with it. And it can be so hard and so much to ask of a child that, you know, while we didn't get to sign up for this. We didn't get to choose this lifestyle. And so a lot of people think of that and view it as such a negative way. But then, you look around and you're like, this is actually kind of cool and
Right.
incredible thing that I get to experience.
I actually feel sorry for the people who like lived in one place their whole lives. I He's like that, he grew up in Ohio and he left. And then he's lived in Florida ever since, and, so he has no clue, what the rest of the world is like. It's actually been sort of fun because I've been taking him on trips and introducing him to other cultures, and he's, like, so amazed. In some ways, I think, he just doesn't know how to get out there. He's rather timid, and I'm like, geez, I never thought about it because I was always the shy person, but I think being a military brat definitely made me stronger and better able to fit in. And it's been a real plus with patients because, one of the challenges of being a doctor is so much of whether a patient gets better or does well in a procedure is how you can communicate with them.
Yeah.
And do they understand what you're talking about? And I think because I have seen so much, I have a better understanding when a patient may not be on the same wavelength as I do, and I have many more skills and techniques to communicate to them what they need to understand and what they need to be able to do to be able to get through a procedure in the most healthy way.
Yeah, and the medical field is no joke. Like, it is, you know, where you make a mistake and, that's someone's life that you're risking, and, that's one thing that I was going on the medical track, and then I was like, this might not be for me." But, there's so much that, you can take from the lifestyle of a military brat from growing up in those situations that apply to your career and later on in life that, it's hard. Like, I could not imagine living in one place. Like, I have lived in 3 different places, and I could not imagine being in one. So, it is definitely
I
an experience to move in. It's so important to be able to put yourself out there and find a love for travel and see the rest of the world.
I think so, because many people become fearful of what strange things might mean to them. And,
Right?
the world drinking because we have, the internet, which connects us, and yet there are real-time consequences if we misunderstand each other. So I think it's very helpful to have had a wide variety of experience and realize, wherever you went, people are people, even if they have different customs, and, to be able to get past those differences and to find a way to communicate with someone who eats entirely different things than you or has different ideas about the world, but pretty much most of us are good people.
Yes, I love that. Do you have a specific place that you call home? It's like the hardest question to ask a military brat, but do you
Yeah,
have somewhere?
I've never really thought about that. No, I don't. I've lived in Florida now for the longer than any other time. I was myself in the Army. It paid for my medical education, so I was 11 years on active duty as a trauma surgeon in the military. And I would have made it a
Wow.
career. I also had like another 4 years in the reserves, but for me, it wasn't working out. I don't know if it had to do with my gender, or what it was. My adopted father had the same issue. He was a chaplain, and he really believed in um, the it was be God, then the commander, or God, the commander, and then, all the people he served. So the commanders didn't like having God above them. So
Right.
do what he felt was the right thing, and as a consequence, he held the distinction of being one of the longest serving lieutenant colonels, or without being promoted, just because he didn't kiss ass. I probably shouldn't. Anyway, so he taught me that lesson, and I wasn't getting anywhere in the military either. So I decided it would be best that I left. And people were saying, "Oh, you have 15 years in, just 5 more years." And I was like, "I'm sorry, my life is too short."
Yeah.
And it actually worked out very well for me. I'm glad that I left when I did. Otherwise, I would have been caught in some of these backdoor drafts. But I wanted a family, and my window of opportunity was closing rapidly. So I had to get out. And I came to Florida, and I've enjoyed having some roots here, but I do like travel. So that's a result of my heritage. I know when I'm stressed for some reason, I always crave Japanese food, and that might be because, that was where I was born.
Yeah.
In fact, my mother was Japanese, so it's kind of interesting. I've gone back and tried to see if that country speaks to me. It's an amazing country, but unfortunately, a little bit racist. They don't seem to like the mixed blood children, so I enjoy visiting it. And my mother is still alive in Yokohama, but it's a very odd relationship. I think she's just proud of me and embarrassed by me. So here we are. I don't belong to anywhere. I belong to the world. That's how I feel.
Yeah. No, I love the outlook of that because it's so isolating when you put yourself in one place and say, "This is where I'm gonna be forever." And, it's kind of relieving to have roots somewhere, and it's great to be able to go back, but it's so fun to get to see the rest of this country, the rest of this world, and like you said, experience those cultures and try new foods and see new places. It's, something that everyone should do in their lifestyle or in their lifetime.
I strongly believe that.
Yeah.
So,
Do you think, you mentioned you served yourself. Do you think that your dad's service kind of had an influence on that?
well, absolutely. I was used to that lifestyle. It felt comfortable to me. But the main reason was, I didn't have any wealthy relatives to put me through Harvard Medical School. So I kind of had to Uncle Sam. So I want to thank all the taxpayers out there that helped me get to that school and a very good education. And I hope that I did pay it back. As I said, I got to serve in many interesting places and have a lot of experiences as an Army surgeon myself. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I would have stayed in forever. But actually, the funny part, and I don't know how much is genetics or not, I always wanted to join the Air Force because they had the pretty blue uniforms. But the Air Force was exclusive. They wouldn't give me a yes. They put me on a maybe list, and I needed to have a commitment in order to go to school. So the Army
Right.
took me in, so they got me.
Yeah. College
Actually, no, to
is
be true, I wanted
expensive,
to,
so
yeah, I wanted to be a Marine, but apparently they don't have doctors, so I don't know what they do. Shoot them if they get injured or sick. Not, I took care of many Marines while I was in the service. It was just wherever you were stationed.
Yeah, it's you know, we love my dad was injured in Afghanistan in 2011. So we have our fair share of being on military bases with military doctors, and we are very thankful, to everyone. A Navy corpsman saved his life. So um he was Army and he was attached to the Marines. So everyone was there, and it's really incredible to see the way that just all the military medical community surrounds these guys when they come back and are injured and have, you know, my dad was an amputee, so traumatic injuries that, take a lot of healing and recovery from.
Hmm. Sure. So, and some kids handle it better. I have, the two sisters. I was adopted with another half Japanese girl who was 7 years older than me. And I was too young at 1 years old to know, what was happening. But I guess she was old enough, and her mother told her, "Oh, you should go with the Americans. They are all very rich. You'll have maids and everything." So the poor girl was shocked to find out, no, not all Americans are rich.
Right.
And she
Especially
didn't
not
have a maid,
military.
right. And then, as is often the case, after they adopted, the reason we were adopted by a military family was back in those days, they didn't let the American military adopt American babies. They moved so much, they felt they were high risk. If a child was adopted, there was no follow-up on the child. So the military pioneered the adoption of these Asian babies, the mixed foreign children. So my parents were in their 40s and had not been able to have children. So they asked to be assigned to Japan, where there were many of these children. And as is often the case, after they adopted, the pressure was off, so they got pregnant right away. So my poor mother went course of 1 year in her 40s from no children to three children, an
Oh my
8-year-old, a
goodness.
toddler. Oh, yeah, I think it was a bit much. So my older sister got stuck with a lot of babysitting.
Yeah, I can imagine that. That's a lot.
Right.
Yeah. Oh my
But
goodness.
it was interesting. But I did track down my natural father at one time. He was apparently an Air Force doctor.
Oh,
So
wow.
maybe it was genetic that I wanted to be in the Air Force myself.
Yeah. So you just come from like a military family all around.
Yes. Even before I was born, I was military.
Wow, that is so cool. And, such an incredible story because you don't often hear, you know, the whole adoption process of overseas and with military kids. And, it's a whole whirlwind of a new lifestyle that, we're bringing these kids into.
It is, and it brings up some more serious issues. My mother told me the story when I tracked her down. She said she was only 19 and she met my father at a USO dance. She said, "We didn't speak each other's language, but he didn't wear a wedding band and he didn't try to hide her. He took her to nice restaurants where the Japanese women normally didn't get taken. So at 19, she thought they were having a very big, grand love affair, and she didn't realize that he was already married back in the States and he had already a child. So she was so naive, she didn't realize, that she was pregnant. She had morning sickness, and being a doctor, he smuggled her into the base hospital and did the test. So the poor girl found out she was pregnant when he sat her in a chair and said, "Now I have Japanese doctor friend who can fix this." So the way that he said it, she realized fix means this means I'm pregnant, and fix means he wants abortion. And he shouldn't be this way. He should be happy we're having a baby. We're in love. So she was
Right.
so shocked, didn't know what to do. She ran out of the office, and I don't know why she didn't go through with an abortion. In Japan, they don't feel this is such a terrible thing. What is more terrible in that culture is to have an unwanted, especially mixed blood child. But I think she didn't realize he was married. So I think she just thought he had cold feet. And if he saw me, he would change his mind. So she was very strong, went off and had me somehow all by herself.
Oh my
And
goodness.
I know, tough lady. I have
Yes.
those good genes too. And when I was 2 months old, she scraped together money and she got a color picture of me, which she sent to my father in Tokyo. And he sent it back with $100 bill and a note his secretaries had written in Japanese, which said, "The doctor wants you to have this." So she realized that $100 was a lot in 1954, but not enough, to run baby for any of time. But she was very pretty, so she was working as a model and very successful. And she would give me to baby photo shoots. And one day they didn't give me back. They had sold me to an American GI.
Oh my
So I actually got,
gosh.
yeah, trafficked as a child. And she called the police, but the police couldn't do anything about it. It was an American. They had no jurisdiction over the Army of Occupation. But because she was so distraught and beautiful, they took pity and said, "Call child welfare." So child welfare became involved, and they said, "We can get the baby back, but this isn't a long-term solution. It's a mixed blood child. Won't ever be accepted in Japan. Usually the girls can't marry, so they wind up as prostitutes." And I think at this point, after a year of hiding things from her family, because she came from a very good family, she was actually sort of spoiled, the baby of 7 kids. And her mother was 47 when she was born. So by the time I was born, her mother was 67. So I don't think she wanted the poor old lady to get stuck raising this child, and she hadn't told anyone. So she caved and signed the papers, and then she had a change of mind. But in Japan, as here, once you sign those papers, it's irrevocable.
Right.
So at that point, she had a nervous breakdown and tried to kill herself. She took pills, and her roommate was going off on a photo shoot. So when the lady left, she wrote a note and took them. But the photo shoot was canceled because of a typhoon. So she came back early in time to find my mother and call the ambulance. But at that point, the hospital notified her parents, so she was in big trouble. I don't know if they were more upset that she tried to kill herself or that she'd had a baby without telling them, or that for adoption. All of those are big no-nos. So
Right.
ultimately, though, she had a very good life. She decided the best thing to do would be to marry a GI and leave Japan rather than be in disgrace. So she, being very pretty, had no trouble doing that and came to the US. And that marriage didn't last, but she got a job at the Eden Rock Hotel in Miami Beach, and she was a cigarette concession girl. And she actually was so cute. She was like a mini celebrity. She dated Frank Sinatra. And I have photos
Wow.
to prove all of this. It's too bad it's a podcast, but you know. So she had a very interesting life and then ultimately remarried, and the guy brought her back to Japan. So that's where she is now to this day. She's still 90
Oh
and
my
lives alone.
goodness.
Yeah, pretty
What a
cool.
story.
It is a story, isn't it?
Yeah, no, that's incredible. Like, you would never have thought, all of that would piece together, but
Right.
that is really incredible.
But I think that's one of the big problems with having, taking young men and sending them far from their families
Right.
without kind of supports. So I hope the military has gotten better over the decades at dealing with those things. Maybe it's better, now that there are more women in the military too, but people will be people wherever they live.
Exactly. Yeah, I think definitely, as the years have gone by, even, I'm still young, but seeing the changes from when, I was younger to now, there are so many things that have definitely, I think, changed to positively impact um just the way families are dealt with in the military because that's huge. And technology sucks and is great at the same time. And, it's great to be able to stay connected a little better to your families when you're apart. Well, that's still extremely hard, but it's nice to be
Yeah.
able to interconnect with all of that.
Right, right. Yeah. Yeah, you look very young, so I was thinking a lot happened since I was a military brat.
Yeah, it's fun listening to the changes of just, a couple years even, and listening to the kids growing up now in the military, or, those who grew up prior to me, and, my friends, that everything is so different.
Mhm. Yeah, I would imagine the social media and, like our ability to talk where I don't even know where you're at, but to see each other face to face would make a big difference.
Right.
I was in the pre-cell phone era. We had satellite phones, but they didn't work very well. And I remember when I was stationed in Honduras, we had like two landlines for, I don't remember how many. It was usually about 1,500 people, and you had to go through the operator to get to the party you wanted to call. So it took you like sometimes 10 or 15 minutes just to get connected to your family back home and chat. And then there'd be a long line. So it wasn't like you could stay on the phone, and you certainly couldn't see people. So that was a big problem. And then, of course, the reservists would come onto the base after being out in the jungles for 4 months. And so they hadn't been drinking. And the first thing they would do is get all drunk. And then they would go to the phone to call their family. And because it took so long and they were drunk, they'd get mad. And invariably, at least one of the phones was ripped out. Well, then we'd be down to one phone for like, 2,000, 3,000 people.
Yeah, and that's a lot. It's a
That's a
lot.
lot.
Everyone trying to use the phone at the same time.
Right. And if the satellites were not functioning, now I think there's so many of them, it's almost like space junk up there,
Right.
redundancies. But back then there weren't that many. So it was very hit or miss. And most of the time I didn't even try because it was too frustrating to call. So you just kind of didn't think about it for the 6 months you were in Honduras. But that would be really hard for children. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why, like, so many kids growing up now. I didn't really grow up in where we had FaceTime and stuff available. My dad deployed to Afghanistan once and I got a letter. Like there was no Skype really. It was still, you know, growing in technology and social media and all of that. And so it's really cool to listen to those now and say, "Oh yeah, I was able to like video call with my dad when, he was deployed or my mom." And
Mhm.
listening to all that is really cool.
It would be, although having seen both sides, I'm sure it's difficult,
Yeah.
especially the parent is in an area of danger. You don't want to alarm the family. You tend not to say stuff, but people are pretty smart. And I think especially the young kids now can kind of figure out where people are and what's going on. So
Yeah, there's
or
always
it must
good and
be
bad.
a nightmare from the security side of things for the commanders, like, how much can the parents communicate?
Right.
I don't know. But military brats have my deepest sympathies, and I'm glad I'm one of them.
Yes, I think as challenging of a lifestyle it is to live and, you know, so many challenges that we face and struggles, I think looking back, most military brats can say that they are so thankful for the life they lived and are so thankful to have been a military brat because of how much it's taught them.
All right. And for those struggling, it, especially I remember when I was younger, it was like I was too emotional and just anything affected me very negatively. But I think once you get to a certain age, if you can get there, and that's the problem, many people panic if they're not able to be strong inside or they feel like they're a failure. And so then they do stupid things like drink too much or try to medicate themselves with
Right.
drugs or engage in risky behaviors. And so those are things that can actually shorten your lifespan. But if you can get through it, and there I think are a lot more resources now available online. We didn't have access even to the psychologist. I know my mother, well, in the military, a lot of times what you say to the psychiatrist if you're active duty is certainly not held in private. Private, your commander
Right.
has access to it. So you have to be very careful about those sort of things. But nowadays, with online stuff, you have a certain degree of privacy and access to things that we didn't have in the past. So I urge anyone out there that's struggling. A lot of us have been in that situation, and if you can get through it, it's going to make you a stronger person. So, stay alive and get help. That's all I can say.
Yeah, well, that kind of just answered a little bit of the last question I was gonna ask you, but do you have any advice that you would give to military brats?
Yeah. It's easy to be negative when you're young and things happen that are out of your control. I've got to start over in another new school. I was always a good student. So when I'd move, of course, the good students would be threatened by me. So it didn't make me very popular. So, and I didn't make friends easily. So, I didn't. Um, appreciate many of the advantages I was getting, and I felt things very intensely, and I didn't feel good about myself. But all I can say is these things will pass, and especially for older people, when you go back to your like school reunions and you see the popular people often turn out the worst, and sometimes the nerdy people or the ones that you didn't think were really that cool have a really good life. So it's easy to get discouraged, I think, when you're younger and think, oh, this is how my life always will be unpleasant. But you will have more control over your life, and you just can't give in to those negative things. Be strong. You're
Right.
needed, and the experiences you're going through will help you so much in the future. So don't let it get you down. It's real, but the things you're going through are not easy for anyone, but you can do it. If I could
Yeah.
do it, I was just a nerdy little geek person.
Yeah, no, I love that. It's, so good to just remember those things. Even though it's hard to think like that when you're in the moment, it's gonna benefit you in the long
Oh,
run.
yes. So, like, I took up fire dancing when I was in my 50s. So now I'm a professional fire dancer. And every year I do something new. And I'm at that
Yeah.
age, I'm almost 70, where people are like, oh no, you're going to sit in the chair and not do things. I'm having a blast, and I couldn't have ever thought that, say, when I was 14 in Fort Benning and my dad was going off to Korea for a year and a half. So, you know, just hang in there, hang
Yes.
in there. It
Yes,
gets
for
better.
sure. Thank you so much, Margaret, for being on the podcast and sharing your incredible life story.
Well, my pleasure. Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to get to meet you.
Yes, absolutely.